Hi, everyone. My name is Amber, and I am a mind-body expert. Joining me here today is Josh.
Hello, I'm Josh, and I'll be asking Amber some common questions we get asked about suspensions, and she'll be guiding me through how to add and edit suspensions for a few different clients. So let's start off with our first question, which is why would you suspend a contract in the first place, and how is that different from terminating a contract?
Yeah, great question. So the reason why you would want to suspend a contract is if someone's going on vacation or if they're injured. What it does is it puts a temporary pause on a contract. And then when a client comes back in, you would want to reactivate that contract right when they're ready to pick up.
You mentioned a contract is paused when it's suspended. What happens to the client's pricing options and autopays during that pause?
So for the autopay, when you pause, there's going to be no autopay charged within that duration. And then once the client comes back in and you unsuspend the contract, it's going to pick up exactly where the remaining duration of that month's charge was. So for example, if you have a monthly recurring autopay, let's say 15 days into the autopay, the client is going to leave for a month. So you would put a pause on, it would pause and have that suspension for 1 month. Then when they come back, it'll pick up for the remaining of that 15 days from the original duration. And then it would go forward with another autopay 15 days later.
Okay, I think we should walk through this with some clients. First, we need to add a suspension to our client named Farah, who is going to be on vacation for 5 days.
So what we would do is we would go to Farah's client profile. We would navigate over to her account details where you would be able to see that contract on file. And then within her account details, where that contract section is, you'll find a button that says suspend. We would want to select that suspend button. And once you get there, let's say she's going to be gone for 5 days. All that you would need to do is put the date that her suspension begins and then end suspension 5 days. Also, make sure you're entering a reason for the suspension so you know why it's being suspended. In this case, Farah will be out of town. Lastly, you'll click the Add Suspension button. Also remember, since pricing options are active even after a suspension has started, that membership icon still may show on the client's profile, so have no fear, it's still accurate.
We also need to extend an existing suspension for our client named Brandy. How should we do that?
So in Brandy's example, since she already has a suspension scheduled, but she needs it to end at a later time, maybe she's delayed longer than she thought she'd be. Same thing that we did with Farah. You're going to go to Brandy's profile, navigate to the account details page, and you'll see her contract and the suspension that's already scheduled. What you do there is you'd still click into that same section that says suspend, but now it says suspended because there's already one scheduled. And what you would do is you would add a secondary suspension for the remaining days that she will be gone. So it's already scheduled for a little over a month. Let's say she needs to do another 2 weeks on top of that. You can schedule for another 14 days. Or if she doesn't know when she'll be back, you can select open-ended suspension. And then when she returns, you can unsuspend.
Should we delete the previous suspension?
No, you would want to keep the current suspension intact because if you do delete it, that is going to remove all historical data of that suspension, and it's going to return all of the autopay dates back to their original. You're only really going to want to do this if it's been made in error or if the new suspension that you just created has the incorrect duration length.
Sometimes a business wants to allow a client to continue to be able to book during their suspension, like booking classes that take place after their suspension ends and they're going to return. However, if we don't want this, can we stop clients from booking during their suspension instead?
Yes, you can stop clients from booking during their suspension. You can go to General Setup and Options to find that setting. Once that's enabled, you'll be able to see a suspension booking start and end time on the client's profile, which is separate from the contract suspension period. Remember, though, that clients who are already scheduled for visits during that suspension time, it's not going to automatically cancel those visits. So you can go to their profile, look at their schedule page, and early cancel any visits that are left there.
The last thing I want to look at is manually removing a suspension. In this case, JJ is coming in earlier than he thought he would.
So with JJ's profile, he has a open-ended suspension already on his account. So what we need to do when he comes back in is manually unsuspend that current suspension. So again, you'd navigate to his account details, and then once you see his suspension that's already scheduled, you'll see there's an unsuspend button next to the duration that's currently scheduled. This might be the case if there's an open-ended suspension or if they come back early from a predetermined set number of days.
When does the autopay run when we remove the suspension manually?
When you unsuspend, it's not going to automatically run that autopay until about midnight or 3 a.m., somewhere in that window. If you wish to manually push that autopay through to charge when the client's there, you can go back to the account details of that client's page, select the autopays section or the autopay schedule, and then you can select that autopay that should be run by checking the checkbox on the far right and hitting Run All Check Transactions Now. If the last autopay happened to be refunded, when that suspension is lifted, there's going to be no active pricing option on the client's profile. If they wish to return to classes, you can go into their autopay schedule, prorate their next charge amount to whatever's remaining for that duration period, and push that autopay through. Once you've run that autopay, you'll want to edit the pricing option so that it will remain active until the next autopay charges automatically. With JJ, we're going to change the 1-month duration to 48 days instead, so that the pricing option will expire on December 8th, which is the day the next autopay will charge.
So Amber, aside from what you've already covered, is there anything else we should know?
Yeah, so there's a few things that are helpful to know about suspensions. The first thing is that when you view the autopay schedule on the client's profile, everything that's scheduled there, whether it was in the suspension period or outside of the suspension period, will show as suspended.
Gotcha. So when a client is actively in their suspension period, their future autopays will show as suspended, even though when they come out of the suspension, those autopays will run normally.
Also on the account details screen, if a secondary contract duration appears, make sure you suspend or terminate that one as well, depending on if it's set to charge during the client's suspension. Each contract needs to be suspended individually, so if they have multiple contracts, they will all need to be adjusted.
What about in a situation where there's a shares pricing option relationship and the person who's sharing the pricing option has a suspended contract?
If the client who's requesting a suspension has a shared pricing option relationship, be it with a family member or something like that, that family member will also be affected by the suspension. They will not be able to have access to that pricing option in that duration.
I know sometimes a business wants to charge fees for suspensions, like adding extra charges on top of the standard autopay for pushing back the charge date. Is that possible?
Yes, you can do this. There is a setting back in General Setup and Options where you can turn this setting on. However, when you are actually scheduling the suspension, that's where you would set the term suspension fee amount. For example, if the business charges $10 for an autopay that should normally be scheduled, you can simply enter 10 before you add the suspension.
Perfect. This has been super helpful, and I'd like to thank Amber for taking time out to answer some questions and walk us through these steps.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to help. Thanks everyone for watching.